Up the Long Ladder is the next episode, and this one is episode number 44 for The Next Generation, and it originally aired on May 20th, 1989. It was written by Melinda Snodgrass and directed by Winrich Kolbe. Plot-wise with this episode, the episode begins with Worf not feeling quite right at his security station on the bridge. He is growling to himself and not looking too well with his facial expressions, and then he finally collapses onto the bridge floor. He's taken to sickbay, and Dr. Pulaski discovers that Worf has what is basically the measles for Klingons. And Worf is immediately embarrassed by this because he considers it a child's disease. And it is true that most Klingons only get it when they're children. But unfortunately, Worf did get it. But Dr. Pulaski decides that she's not going to reveal this to Captain Picard, and just makes another explanation for why Worf fainted. And Worf is forever in Pulaski's debt, and he decides to thank her by having a Klingon tea ceremony with her, in which humans cannot actually drink the tea because it is actually poisonous to humans. But Pulaski is so excited about this, and she is actually aware of this practice, that she decides to give herself some antidotes so she can fully experience this tea ceremony with Worf. And then the next step is for them to recite some Klingon love poetry, so Pulaski requests Worf to do that for her. Then, meanwhile, while at Starbase 73, Picard receives word about a distress call from the Ficus sector, and some investigation reveals that the SS Mariposa left Earth early in the 22nd century, and it was headed toward the Ficus sector. Now, the Mariposa transported not only colonists, but also an odd collection of primitive tools and technologically advanced computers. Now, at the origin of the distress call, the Enterprise finds a group of 223 colonists and assorted farm animals, as you can see in this picture. And the Enterprise crew was certainly not aware that this was going to be the case when they beamed them over, so Picard immediately decides that he's going to transport them into the cargo bay instead. Now, they call themselves the Lloyd II. Since their sun is generating intense solar flares, Picard has decided to evacuate the colonists. So they insist on bringing their animals, and as I said, they were taken to the cargo bay. Now, during the conversation with the Lloyd leader, Picard discovers the existence of another colony planted by the Mariposa. So while our Commander Riker is having a little fun with one of the Lloyd's daughters, the Enterprise soon finds that the other colony is in a nearby star system. It's in a colony of clones, as they discover. So the story with this one is, hundreds of years ago, the Mariposa crash-landed on the planet, and only 5 of the colonists survived, 3 men and 2 women. Now, since they were scientists, they decided to turn to cloning to survive and populate the planet. Now, unfortunately, replicative fading has occurred, and what that means is each clone is a copy of the last, who is also a copy of a copy. And when that happens, subtle errors in the DNA have crept in. Now, in 2 or 3 generations, the clones will no longer be viable, and everyone will die. First, what they ask the Enterprise crew is if 2 of their crew members, and they ask Riker and Pulaski first, if they would be willing to be cloned so they could have a longer life for their civilization. But Riker and Pulaski refuse this, and at first they are kidnapped, and while they're unconscious, they are cloned. Well, soon Riker and Pulaski discover what happened, and they destroy these clones. Now, Picard suggests his solution. The clones need an infusion of breeding stock to revive their society, so coincidentally the Lloyd need a new home. So Picard proposes that the Lloyd settle on the clones' world, and faced with no other solution, the clones begrudgingly accept, and the 2 colonies that began on the Mariposa are reunited. And that is the end of the episode. Now, this episode is a pretty interesting one. Melinda Snodgrass, who wrote the episode, actually says it was intended to be a commentary about immigration because she hated the current American policy on it, and she wanted something that said that sometimes outsiders you think are smelly and wrong colored can bring enormous benefits to your society because they bring life and energy. And she says that's what she was going for. And her boss, Maurice Hurley, who is a major Irishman and leads St. Patrick's Day parades, when she was describing the episode to him and what she wanted to do, she was trying to come up with an analogy, and she said it was like a village of Irish tinkerers, and he loved it so much that he wanted her to make them Irish tinkerers, and that's how that came about. Now, also what was interesting is the irony is that she got a lot of flack from the Right to Life Coalition because they destroyed the clones in this episode, and they thought she was basically condoning abortion. And there are some lines that Riker says that are very pro-choice, and the Right to Life Coalition basically went crazy with that. And that is interesting that in the episode that Riker and Pulaski basically don't hesitate and kill the clones. When we see, I'm giving something away, so this is further down the line in TNG, but there is an episode called Second Chances, where Riker discovers that there is a clone of him, and in that case, Riker doesn't even think about killing this other Riker. But apparently it was earlier in the stages of the clone, so in this episode, Riker and Pulaski decide to kill the clones without even thinking about it. Picard doesn't even chastise them for it, so apparently, basically everyone's pro-choice in the 24th century. Guess that's the way it goes. Anyway, this episode as a whole, I actually enjoyed it. I thought all of the parts of this episode were very interesting, but it is a little strange how it's configured together, and doesn't always seem like a great fit necessarily. The Worf segment, which I mentioned at the beginning, really has nothing to do with any of the rest of the episode, and it really is only mentioned in the first quarter of the episode and never talked about again. So it's kind of like, I got the impression that the writers came up with this idea of Worf getting the measles, and they just decided to stick it in this particular episode, so it wasn't interwoven very well. Then you have the part with the Bring Lloydie, and they are definitely a great comic part of this episode, and they have some really funny lines in it. In fact, even the character of Picard laughs because he says sometimes you just have to bow to the absurd. And it is really funny to have a bunch of barnyard animals running around in the cargo bay, and some of the characters are really funny. I think one of the daughters of the Bring Lloydie is pretty hilarious, and so is her father. So I think I had a lot of fun watching them. But they're thrown in, and then you have the clones, who are ultra serious, and they set a completely different tone than the Bring Lloydie. In this part, they do attempt at least to merge together, because they're basically opposites of each other, and in the end we see how they need to work together to solve the problem. But it does seem like kind of a disjointed episode to me. Having said that, I still liked it, and I was entertained by it. So, thumbs up to this episode. Hope you guys liked it too. Whether you did or not, I encourage you guys to comment below, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you guys next time.